Hello everyone, welcome to Bhadra IAS Academy. Today we are going to discuss another important topic for the prelims point of view, and it will come for many competitive exams as well. This is the new Income Tax Act 2025 which was announced by the government. Okay, so the new Income Tax Act 2025, what is the very basic philosophy? What is the key point that you find is that it says it is a very simple format of the existing Income Tax Act, so that easy for people to understand. So basically it is a simplified provisions which are given there. Okay, it will be kind of a transparent taxation. A lot of confusing things, terms have been removed, so easy for Aam Aadmi. Therefore it will be fair and equitable system. It will empower in a way the taxpayer. They will be able to easily calculate their tax liability and file their income tax return, right? So now what are the key points that we need to understand for the exam perspective, right? So now exam perspective, when you think, I have put here as kind of a summary which will be basically relevant for the prelims point of view. Now the old Income Tax Act, you see it is 1961, the new Income Tax Act 2025, but it came into effect from this year, that is the 1st April 2026. Clear? The number of sections in the old act were 819, the new act is around 536. But if you consider the legal language, language of the text, it was very complex legal language which had the old Income Tax Act, but the new tax makes it much easier and simpler language so that people can understand. So there are about 23 chapters are there in the old one, and the new one also has 23, but it is roughly reorganized. Now one major change they made is the concept of previous year, that assessment year, all that confusion was there. Now they have made the change into just a simple word tax year, that is which year ka tax. It will be simply written in the direct way, right? So so there are quite a few changes made. Okay, so if you look at one more highlight here, I try to give here the important point here as well. The Income Tax Act 2025, it has replaced the 64-year-old Income Tax Act 1961, right? So it is come into effect from 1st April 2026, and it applies to the income earned in the tax year. So now we use the term tax year, that is like 2026-27, that is starting from this year. Clear? Now what are the major changes? Okay, so I put it in point wise, it will be easier for you also to follow. The terms like previous year, assessment year, these have been changed. They are simplified. So now the income tax will be using a single concept, what we call the tax year. Like the tax year means what? Like for example, income earned from 1st April 2026 to 31st March 2027, it will be called tax year. Clear? So earlier we used the term assessment year, previous year, all that. It was very confusing. Second important change highlight is the nearly about 300 sections, either they are removed or merged, so some unwanted things have been removed. So government tried to make it simpler. So there are very shorter provisions, less cross referencing, and easier for taxpayers to comply with, and also for any students who are studying Income Tax Act, etc., to understand. The third important point we need to understand, there are no major change in the tax slab. So whatever the tax slabs were there earlier, they have maintained the same tax slab. There is not much change. Like for example, you see up to 0 lakh there is no tax, 4 to 8 lakh you have 5%, 8 to 12 you have 10%, 12 to 16 15%, like that. So above 24 lakh your tax liability, the tax rate comes to 30%, right? So this is the tax slab of our income tax. So they have not made many change in that. Okay. Now the new tax regime continues as the default regime from this year, from this financial year. However, there are certain people who are eligible, they can still continue with the old regime to comply with the old system also, but the new regime will be like what we can say the default system starting from 1st April 2026. Now the government also said that the updated compliance, like for example the accompanying income tax rules 2026 introduced several procedural changes as well. For example, the ITR forms, that means the income tax return forms, they have been revised. Some changes are there, like who has to fill which form number, that is a change. Then higher exemption limit for some kind of allowances where you can deduct your income tax liability. This I will explain in the next slide. They also expanded 50% of the house rent allowance exemption, HRA means house rent allowance exemption, to more cities compared to the previous old regime. Okay, this also I will explain. Like in the previous regime we had a very few cities, like 4 metro cities, etc. Now they have increased it to many more cities in that list. There other cities can also benefit. And the revised PAN quoting thresholds and compliance procedures also have been notified by the government. So therefore what we can say, there are some key changes in the new act as well, but the fundamental things have not been changed. There is no overhauling of the income tax act. So now what is the meaning of this term? What I said, what is the meaning of this term that we need to understand? Higher exemption limits, for some allowances. So let us try to get some clarity on that. So the higher exemption limits for some allowances, what does it mean? So if you look at here, the income tax rules 2026 have revised these exemption ceilings, like certain allowances received from employers are exempt from tax up to some limit. Okay, now government ने क्या किया, इस limit को थोड़ा ज़्यादा कर दिया, right? For example, children का education allowance, hostel expenditure allowance, transport allowance, like that there are various types of allowances given by your employer, which can be deducted from the income tax liability. That is the idea. So now employees eligible for these allowances pay a very small portion of their salary as income tax. Rest can be claimed as a allowance. So government has modified this allowance limit. The next one, the point that we mentioned also is the HRA, house rent allowance, is another allowance paid by employers to their workers. So now what happened, this also can be deducted for your income tax liability. Like earlier it was like a 50% of basic salary only for metro cities, like Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, right? So employees in all other cities, they could claim only 40%, whereas the metro cities could claim 50%. So you see there is a difference. Abhi government ne kya kiya? The government has now expanded the list of eligible cities, for the 50% limit. That means now not only Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, but also other cities also will get this benefit. They will be able to deduct about 50% of their HRA from income tax liability. What does it mean? This means now more employees living in the newly notified cities can claim higher HRA exemption. Okay, so that is the advantage of the new income tax act of the 2025. Now based on this topic, I have also given MCQ which might be relevant for your exam preparation. Now if you look at the Income Tax Act 2025, it replaces the concepts of both the previous year and assessment year with a single concept called tax year. So the act came into force from 1st April 2026. It applies to income earned during 2026-27 onwards. The new tax regime continues the default tax regime under the new act, like the old one, right? It remains with the new one also as a, for the new financial year, as a default system. The act introduced entirely a new system of income taxation. So which of the statements are correct? So here is the thing, we have to be very clear. What are the statements correct? So options are 1, 2, 3, 1 and 4, 2 and 4, yeah, all 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if you see, as I already told you, the new system does not change everything entirely. So problem is there with statement number 4. So if you look at the answer, therefore the correct answer for this would be option 1, 2 and 3 only, because statement 1 is correct, 2 correct, 3 also correct, right? So the new regime still remains the default system, but eligible taxpayers can go for the old system. Whereas the statement 4 is wrong. You know, this is where we have a problem. The new system does not abolish the old tax regime. It has only made some changes, change the sections, change the language into simpler form, etc. But the old income tax regime continues also. Clear? So only statement 1, 2, 3 are correct. So kindly prepare this kind of topic. These are most likely topics to come for the exam as well. Okay. And for your more preparation, you need any notes or admission related query, you can contact Bhadra IAS Academy at 8638391721. Okay. So keep watching our videos for more and more topics for your exam preparation. Thank you.